film you're about to see here was made before the Senate voted on the Constitution Amendment Bill. However, we will let you see this film because the points are nevertheless still relevant. Now, this study here that you are about to see will explain to you a lot of things that are facts and that are true. So pay careful attention to what you will see. Amen. Good day. This is Brother Medina for the Tusian Institute of Religious Liberty, a rights-based organization. And today we want to discuss the runoff voting section of the constitutional amendment. Please let us start first with a word of prayer. Bless us, Father in heaven, to present everything clear for everyone to understand. We ask this of you, loving Father, and we thank you for hearing us and blessing us through Jesus Christ our Savior. Amen. Well, today our topic from the TIRL, the Tusian Institute of Religious Liberty, it is called political blasphemy. Why political blasphemy? Because in politics, there is also blasphemy. When a government, a ruling government, changes the sacred laws, the sacred constitutional laws of a country to suit one political party, to help one political party stay in office, that in politics we call political blasphemy. And we want to explain this to you. We want to explain and show you what is wrong with the runoff voting section of the Constitutional Amendment Bill. In this discussion, we are not following any political party. We are neither PNM, UNC, COP, ILP, or any other political party for that matter. This is not about political parties. This is not about political questions. This is about our rights and freedoms, our voting rights and freedoms, which we are dealing with. And hence the need to deal with something like this. Whatever we say, it is not hate for a political party or hate for voters of one party or another party, but it is to merely present the facts to you that you may have an informed understanding to make a proper judgment. We are not going to present high platitudes like much of the political analysts and constitutional consultation people that the UNC or the PP has floating around the country that give their views in subtle ways to justify such legislation. We want to deal with it from a pragmatic point of view. We want to get down to brass tacks, to get down to the facts and show you how this runoff voting system works and who benefits from it. Yes, my dear people, our program is dealing with these three following points that are associated with runoff ballots. Point number one, we want to deal with minority representation. Point number two, we want to deal with the value of third-party voting in a general elections. And point number three, we want to deal with the real ruling party's agenda in runoff voting as lifted from their own words. Yes, my dear people. In fact, we have a 10-point summary of the facts behind the runoff law as proposed by the PP government. Let me read these 10 points for you. As you look at your screen, you will see them. Point number one, the subject that is dealt with in this bill with the runoff elections is general elections. Yes, my dear people, they're dealing with general elections right here. That's what this bill deals with, general elections. Point number two, the targeted area that this law of runoff voting targets, the area that it targets are the marginal seats, because only the marginal seats will create the situation that such a runoff voting applies to. Point number three, the problem is the splitting of UNC votes. That's the problem. And you would see the Prime Minister say that over and over again. The problem is the splitting of UNC votes, not PNM votes, because the PNM is not the political party that have the problem with split votes. The party that has a problem with split votes is the UNC. And they have had that problem for quite a long while. As you will see, they saying this with their own words. Point number 4, the culprits that this bill, that this clause deals with, the culprits is third parties, particularly the ILP for now, because the ILP is the third party that will split UNC votes. Point number 4, the enemy that this bill deals with, the enemy is the PNM. And we will show you that from the Prime Minister's words, where she herself said that the enemy is the PNM. Point number 4, the method of dealing with this enemy and dealing with the third parties is runoff votings. That's the method they have concocted or invented and placed in a bill as if it is a dignified law to deal with the PNM, who is the enemy, and third parties, particularly the ILP. The beneficiary of this law, the beneficiary of this clause, is the UNC or the PP government, both of them. The PP government, the UNC. And point number 8, the deceptive bait used to beguile people to accept such legislation is it's giving you more democracy and you will have majority representation now. Those are the deceptions that are being used to make people accept this bill. Point number 9, the losers with which this bill creates, the losers which this clause creates are the PNM, third parties, and Trinidad and Tobago, the whole country. We stand to lose from that runoff clause. And furthermore, any day that the COP sees a lot of corruption taking place in the PP government and decides to break away and pull off on their own and reestablish themselves as an independent political party away from the PP government, they too will suffer loss. So when the current political leader of the COP voted in favor of this bill, he actually voted for the death of the COP as an independent political party. And point number 10, the things that we would lose from this legislation are the voting rights of some of the majority in the country, and plus we would lose more democracy. Now this is what we will show you as we enter into this presentation. But now the founder of the Tusian Institute for Religious Liberty, TIRL, Brother Shannon Bartholomew, will introduce us into the salient points that we need to understand that we will be talking about in this program. So here is Brother Shannon.
Hello, this is Shannon Bartholomew, Executive Director of the Tusian Institute for Religious Liberty. Today we're going to comment on the current reform proposals, that is the constitutional reform proposals put forth by the government. 1. The runoff method was not discussed to begin with at the consultations on constitutional reform. It was not discussed. Yet it was pushed as though it was part of the consultations, and you even had the Attorney General making the claim that you cannot have recall, since recall was discussed, you cannot have recall without runoff. Now that is grossly deceptive, because the idea itself of a runoff vote was not discussed, was not elaborated upon. And even though there have been public calls for public consultation on the bill as it is, as it has passed through the House so far, it has been rejected by the government. So, 1, it was not consulted, it was not part of the public consultations on constitution reform, 1. 2, all the current calls for consultations of the proposals was rejected by the government. If this runoff was for the benefit of the people, would the consultations do harm to it? Would public consultations do harm to the runoff if it is a benefit to the people? What does the government have to hide? If the runoff is going to benefit people, why not then have it? It will be more justified if it is consulted in the public, if more people get to know about it, and it's going to be a benefit, it will just be seen that it is justified what the government is attempting to do. What is there to hide then? Why have they rejected the calls for it to be publicly consulted? So there was no precedent in the country that dictated the need for the runoff method to become law. If there was, who are the people that called for it? How come it is now a surprise to the people to hear about it when it was talked about on Monday in the Parliament with the Prime Minister stating to the public that this had been part of the constitutional reform, yet it wasn't part of the consultations. So there have been no precedent in our country that dictated the need for a runoff method when it comes to general elections. It's not so. Then who is really wanted? Is it the people or the government? It's clear it's the government that really wants the runoff method. And then who is it to serve? The people or the government? It's clear it's to serve the government. But why? History testifies that the concern of the UNC at past elections was always the splitting of the vote by third parties in the interest of the PNM. Let me say that again. History testifies, and that's our local history, testifies that the concern of the UNC at past elections was always the splitting of the vote by third parties in the interest of the government. All you have to do is to look back at the articles in the newspapers that referred to the past elections and see the statements that was made by the Prime Minister going way back even as far as when Mr. Pandey was the head of the political leader of the UNC. So it have always been a concern and a cry that third parties, particularly the ILP, the Independent Liberal Party, headed by Jack Warner, split the votes in favor of the PNM, and that was always a concern of the People's Partnership and the UNC.
Yes, my dear people, those were very clear statements made by Brother Shannon. Now, in this clip that we are introducing you to, you will see the political leader of the UNC and the PP government, the current Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. You will see her showing two things in this clip. Number one, she will be speaking about the splitting of votes from the UNC, and she will show that that is the problem, and she will also demonize the PNM, present the PNM as the enemy. These are the two concerns you will see in this clip. Take a look at it.
The Prime Minister urges traditional UNC supporters not to split the votes. Speaking on the People's Partnership platform in Gasparillo last night, she pointed out that history has shown that in a three-party race, the votes always sway in favor of the PNM. Mrs. Prasad Bissessa says the crab-in-barrel syndrome has to stop.
We divide. Each time we rise, they put us down. Tonight I ask you, do not divide the vote. A house divided against itself will never stand, can never stand, will never stand.
The Prime Minister paints a grim picture of what life would be like if the PNM were to return to office.
Health card, gone. Free childhood education, gone. Laptops for your children, gone. Cuba Children's Hospital, gone. Children's Life Fund, gone. Your children's future, gone. Everything the highway, gone.
Yes, my dear people. In our first document that we have here, we see that Kamla Prasad Bissessa of Trinidad and Tobago, election victory 2010. And this document deals with the election victory of the PP government in 2010. Let me read for you this portion here. It says this: Kamla Prasad Bissessa is leader of the United National Congress, whose party, for political expediency, joined forces with the Dukiran-led Congress of the People, COP, in an effort to prevent a split in the votes of persons of Indian descent. End of quote. Yes, and this is exactly the reason why in this first document that the PP was formed in the first place. The People's Partnership was formed in the first place and took in the CUP under its wings because they wanted to stop the splitting of votes which they believe favors the PNM. So this was a concern for the UNC way back. So much that the very formation of this party was to deal with the problem of splitting of votes. Now they have a new way of dealing with the problem of splitting of votes. And that new way is this legislation, which we will show you. Now here is the second document. PM Prasad Bisesa tells supporters, don't split votes. And this document referred to the local government elections that at that time was coming. Now let me quote, don't split the votes. This is a message being sent to citizens by Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa with regards to the upcoming October the 21st local government elections. Now, do you see how she looks at the whole thing? The splitting of the votes can make her lose. I read, the PM told supporters the government will ensure the country's resources were enjoyed by all citizens and communities, insisting a split in the upcoming poll among the major political parties will work in favor of the opposition People's National Movement. Yes, my dear people, end of quote. So in other words, this government and the UNC has a mania, a fear about splitting votes. They always believe that when votes split, the PNM gain the betterment. Why? Because they know that it is not PNM votes that split with splinter parties. So the splitting of the votes by this is meant UNC votes. And this is what the Prime Minister wants to make sure she stops in this quotation. Again, local government elections. Again, this document tells us PM, don't split the vote. I quote. And this is a document October the 1st, 2013. I quote. Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa last night kicked off the People's Partnership local government campaign, urging the people to not forget Jack Warner's past, and warned that his Independent Liberal Party, ILP, will serve only to split the votes and see a People's National Movement, PNM, victory. Now, did you see how she presents everything here? That the splitting of the votes by ILP will make the PNM win in local government elections. That's the reason why they brought you proportional representation. Not because they cared for majority representation, but they sought to deal with the ILP splitting votes from the UNC and causing the PNM to win. But it didn't work. It backfired to a certain extent. Now hear what she continues and tell us. I quote, she said there was newfound purpose to Warner as a tool for embarrassing her government and ensuring a victory for opposition leader Dr. Keith Rowley by splitting the votes. The Prime Minister said that in the local government elections, there will be three choices: the People's Partnership, the PNM, and the ILP. She said there was no in-between, as a vote for the ILP was a vote for the PNM. Third parties always help the PNM. Do you see how she's regarding it? She says, third parties always help the PNM. It did during the ONR time. It did so during the time when the Team Unity fought the UNC, and again when COP and UNC fought separately, and it has the dangerous potential of doing so now, she said. So you see this? The Prime Minister gave a history of the splitting of votes in which the UNC always loses and the PNM always wins. And this is what the runoff voting is meant to deal with. So wake up from all the high political philosophy and platitudes given by those constitutional consultation hacks that have been hired by the government. Some of the horrible statements they are making in the name of political philosophy, of some of the political analysts that are really UNC political analysts hiding out as independent political analysts, and they always give things in favor of the UNC. Forget all of that, and let's deal with this from a pragmatic point of view. from a clear, pragmatic point of view. The problem for the UNC has always been splitting the votes. Furthermore, let me quote what the Prime Minister said here. She said this here. The ILP, said Prasad Bisesa, does not exist without Warner and built upon exaggerated promises. There is no fundamental vision and philosophy, and no other result will come from this except that its very existence helps Rowley's PNM. Ironically, the people who vote for ILP will never want the PNM. So who is the ILP hurting, she said. Well, we know who the ILP was hurting, the UNC. That's why the Prime Minister was calling for their votes and telling them, don't split the votes. Again, we are told, the Prime Minister said the ILP was today the strength of the PNM and the political life support of Rowley, who was facing a leadership battle in his party. We must not split the vote, we must stay together. End of quote. Did you see that? So again, the Prime Minister shows that their concern has always been the splitting of votes. And third party, as far as she's concerned, always help the PNM. This is what you clearly read here. Now, again, in this next document, Kamala warns against vote splitting favoring PNM, says PNM is the only enemy. Do you see how she regards the PNM as the only enemy? Now, no political leader is supposed to speak that way about the PNM, because when you say the PNM, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of voters with the PNM party because they support the party. So if the PNM is the enemy, then all those that vote for the PNM are voting for the enemy, so they are enemies also. One is not supposed to speak this way. You are also, as a government, supposed to represent PNM voters when you win. So you don't view them as the enemy. You may view them as the opposition, but not the enemy. But clearly, as we have shown you, the enemy this bill, the runoff section, deals with is the PNM, she said. The only enemy, now here is the Prime Minister speaking, the only enemy we have is the PNM, she declared. Did you hear that statement? This clearly shows you who is the enemy according to that legislation. This is your Prime Minister speaking, clearly showing you this whole issue of splitting votes. And this is exactly what the runoff voting clauses in the Constitutional Amendment Bill deals with. It deals with third party. And since the third party that is a threat now is the ILP, it is simply meant to deal with the ILP and the ILP alone. Yes, my dear people. Now, we have the finishing of the local government elections in this document, and Mrs. Bisesa said, I warned you about splitting the vote. Let's hear what she says in this document. I quote, Kamala Prasad Bisesa said Monday that she warned supporters against splitting the vote, but was largely ignored. And the result was a People's National Movement, PNM, victory at the polls. Did you hear what she said? Did you hear what she said? You split the votes, the PNM wins. She goes on. The People's Partnership campaign team was to encourage supporters to come back home and not vote for the Independent Liberal Party, ILP, led by Jack Warner. So when she said come back home, who was she talking to? A large amount of voters of East Indian descent that left the party and voted for the ILP. So she was appealing to racial voting here, come back home. That's what she meant when she said come back home to the party. I continue. Addressing supporters at Renzi Complex, Couva, after learning of the election result, Prasad Bisesa said, I warned you, you know. I warned you. I said the split vote, the Green will not win. Who won? PNM. And let us not make that mistake again in St. Joseph. Why do we continue to make this mistake every time? Why? Did you see that? So she's speaking about the upcoming St. Joseph by-elections and says, do not make that same mistake then. The mistake was made in the local government elections. PNM won. Now don't make that mistake again for the upcoming St. Joseph by-elections. She said, on this campaign trail, I warned you. Some listened. Today the history is recorded. Today the numbers are telling us if we split the vote, the PNM will come back. And if the PNM come back, laptop gone. This is disgusting. This is disgraceful. So in other words, vote that it will get lapped up. Is that the inducements given to us to vote, to get lapped up? But this is how things have come. But we have shown you clearly here their concern was the splitting of votes. In this Newsday article here, don't split votes. And this is October the 23rd, 2013. Again, here's the Prime Minister speaking. She pleaded with UNC supporters in St. Joseph not to allow the ILP to split votes, a phenomenon which cost the UNC the Sangre Grande Regional Corporation, which is now controlled by the opposition People's National Movement in the by-election. She said a splitting of the votes in St. Joseph would pave the way for the PNM taking control of that seat, end of quote. So what do we have here? The conclusion of all our readings clearly shows that the concern of the UNC, of the Prime Minister, has always been the splitting of votes. That has been the concern. As a result of that, we need now to quote from this EBC document on the 2007 general elections, and you would see it reveals to us certain important facts. This chart that you're seeing here on your screen was drawn largely with reference to the EBC document. Now, as you look at the chart here, you would observe that the PNM got 7,179 votes and won the marginal seat of Barataria, San Juan, in contrast to the UNC that got 5,362 votes, and the COP that got 3,817 votes. And this was the 2007 general elections in a marginal seat, Barataria, San Juan. You see the UNC lost because UNC votes went to COP, as the COP split from the UNC. So the COP itself did not accept many of the principles of the UNC, and they split the UNC votes. This allowed the PNM to win in a marginal seat called Barataria San Juan. Now, not only we ourselves know this, the UNC knows this, the analysts know this. Those who wrote that law know this also, and knew that the law was to address things like this. Let's look at this a little more. You'd observe the COP as a third party split the UNC votes. Now, had this not occurred, the UNC might have won. If you look on the right-hand side, you will see the UNC might have won 9,179 votes above the PNM's 7,179. Thus, the UNC would have won the Barataria San Juan seat. This is why the coalition was formed between the COP and the UNC for the 2010 general elections to beat the PNM at the polls by not splitting votes. And if you observe, the same splitting of votes took place in the 2007 elections. However, let's look at a couple more concerns. You have 9,171 votes. You put that together, and that you check that figure, and that figure is the UNC 5,362 and the COP 3,817 together. The total is 9,179 or 9,179, and this is roughly 56.11% of the vote. So we have here 56.11% of the vote voting against the PNM and not wanting the PNM to be in power in that seat there. But then again, when we take the PNM's 7,179 votes and combine it with the COP 3,817 votes, we come to a whopping 10,996 votes together, which is 67.22% of the cast votes. Now, this clearly shows us that the sum total of votes that rejected the UNC, we call that punishment votes, that rejected the UNC, and that sought a term of relief from the UNC was 10,996, a larger amount than the UNC and COP combined together. But you see, my dear people, even if the UNC would have won the Barataria San Juan seat with 9,171 votes as against the PNM 7,179 votes, had that happened in the Barataria San Juan seat, with the votes combined with the UNC votes, therefore getting 56% of the votes, more than 50%, with the PNM's only 7,179, plus all the people that didn't vote. If you take all of them and you put them together, and if you check, you would see on your document here, the electorate is 24,597 votes. The people that didn't vote were 8,239. And when you take their votes and you combine it with the PNM votes, you would find that the UNC candidate would still have been a minority candidate, even though he won more than 50% of the vote. So had he won more than 50% of the votes, which is 9,179, when you check a voter electorate of 24,597, he really and truly is simply a minority representative. And then when you check the larger constituency, he is still, the UNC would have still been a minority representative. And what does this show us? This shows us that minority representative always exists in every constituency, and it is not a problem. Then why is the UNC making the issue minority representatives say you must get 50% of the votes? That's only a scheme to make sure that if the PNM doesn't get 50% of the votes, because the ILP takes some of the votes, they will have to go back again to a second runoff voting, that they might get the ILP votes to join the UNC votes, and so stop the PNM from getting that party. But minority representation always exists. The issue there is just representing the people properly, not how much people voted for you. Yes, my dear people. You see, the ILP, when we check again, the ILP is the new boogeyman that will split the votes. So, had we had a runoff voting in 2007, what would have happened? The UNC would have won the Barataria San Juan seat, and the PNM would have come second. So had we had a runoff elections, since the COP didn't win, but the PNM won in the general elections, but since the PNM got 43.89% of the votes, not 50%, and you had a runoff vote in there, then the UNC could have campaigned to get back some of the COP votes and get the PNM out. So really and truly, what do we see here? That runoff voting is meant to help the party that can muster a majority of votes to get the PNM out, even though they may have won that seat in a general elections. It's a scheme like that, and that is wicked. In politics, that's blasphemy. That is what we are seeing. Now let us quickly go to the 2013 by-elections. Yes, my dear people, the 2013 by-elections. You'd observe that this St. Joseph is another marginal seat. Yes, my dear people. And in this marginal seat, in the St. Joseph by-elections, we are looking at the EBC elections report for St. Joseph in 2013, and this is where our figures generally or largely come from. You'd observe that the PNM won 6,000, look at this on your screen here, look at the document. The PNM won 6,357 votes compared to the UNC's 5,577 votes. And the ILP got 1,976 votes. No candidate got 50% and above of those votes there, because the PNM got 44.72%, as you see. The UNC got 39.23%, and the ILP got 13.90%. Yes, my dear people. Now, the ILP was the new party that split the votes that the UNC may have gotten. And had there been no ILP, the UNC might have gotten the combined ILP and UNC votes with, if you look on your screen here, you would see UNC 5577, ILP 1976 put together. You would get a total of 7,553 votes for UNC, which is 53.13%, more than 50%. They would have won. And don't think they didn't work out all these figures. They worked out all these figures and knew all these facts before they drafted that law. And that law was drafted based upon these facts that they found out here. Now, the sum total of votes that rejected the UNC in the St. Joseph elections is the PNM 6,357 plus the ILP 1,976. Combine their votes together and you will get 8,333 votes, a percentage of 58.62 of the votes, which clearly shows us, again, that a majority of the voters put together with the PNM and ILP did not want the UNC. So, the electorate, as you see on your screen, was 26,819. Non-voters amounted to 12,642. What does this show us? It shows us clearly that anybody that won that seat, whether it is the UNC or whether it was the PNM combining the votes together, they still would have been a minority representative in that area there. If you were to combine the UNC and the ILP with their 53.13% of cast votes, this 7,533 is a minority representative when you take into consideration that they have to represent 26,891 people. Now, the same thing with the PNM. Had you combine the PNM 6,357 votes with the ILP 1,976 votes, totaling 8,333, which is 58.62% of the votes cast, you would still have 8,333, which is a minority party representing 26,891 in the electorate, and even a vast majority of people that are not eligible to vote. What does this show? This shows us that minority representative is not a problem. Even though you may get 50% of the cast votes, you're still a minority representative in the area there, and therefore do not let the UNC use the boogeyman of minority voting as the reason why they are trying to present a runoff voting. Minority voting or minority representation is not a problem. If even self you are a minority, but you won the seat, you can still represent the people. It has always happened. And if even if you get more than 50%, in contrast to the electorate and in contrast to the people in that area who you are representing, you are still a minority representative. So what? It doesn't take away from your representation of the people. So we are not to allow those boogeymen to blind our eyes to reality. Now that we have passed these facts, you've seen clearly if St. Joseph in 2013 had runoff voting, just as the bill that is the PP government is attempting to pass, do you know that the UNC would have won the election in that by-election? Yes, they would have. They saw that. They knew that. And that's what this legislation is all about. Forget the high platitudes. Forget the high philosophy of those UNC analysts, of those people that play they are neutral and they are given a neutral statement, but in the statement they put more of the weight on the part of the UNC. And then talk about the control that the UNC have over questions asked in the news. A large amount of their voters call into that news organization on the television that asks a question. And any question that seems to favor that seems to be against the UNC, they always vote to favor the UNC or the People's Partnership. So the votes are padded by people who are calling up on their cell phones, calling up on their phones, and influencing how people think about the results of those questions asked on those television programs. They have all that, and they're still not satisfied. They control CNMG, this station. The station is supposed to be a local, or what we should say, a station that belongs to the country. Yet the UNC or the People's Partnership treats the station as if it is their personal station. You don't get the PNM campaigning on it. You don't get PNM statements. You do not get ILP statements, ILP campaigning on it. All the news are slanted to make the UNC look good, to make the PP look good. And over, we have a barrage of propaganda of what the UNC have been doing for the country.
As soon as Alwari started to speak, the TV was on all the time, and as soon as Alwari started to speak, the television came off. The television came off and they're racking it up to go.
To explain what you are seeing here, this is the facts. The Prime Minister had just finished giving her statements in the Senate. All this was seen on the television there. As soon as the opposition senator, Mr. Alwari, began to speak, the people that put up this big television screen there cut it off. So they wouldn't hear his voice, they wouldn't hear what the PNM was saying. This is exactly what we are talking about. Bullies always want an unfair advantage. They only want the Prime Minister's words to be heard. But when it was time for the opposition's words to be heard, they didn't want the people to hear it, so they cut it off. This is exactly what we have been highlighting over and over again. Now, my dear people, let us take a final look at what is wrong with this runoff voting clause. Now, since the second ballot runoff voting targets the marginal seats, it is the PP government that it gives a chance, a second chance after the general elections. Notice this, it gives the PP government a second chance after the general elections to recover votes lost to a third party, namely the ILP. And therefore, to recover the seat lost to the PNM because the third party has split the votes in a general election, the runoff voting, the second ballot runoff voting, will help the PP government to regain back that seat from the PNM after a general elections. This is how horrible that legislation is. Point number 3. Now, who benefits from the runoff legislation? Only the UNC-led PP. That's the only party that benefits, because it is not the PNM votes that are split during the general elections. According to the 2007 general elections, it was the UNC votes that split. Remember, the Prime Minister said so? In the local government elections, it was the UNC votes that split going to the ILP. In the St. Joseph elections, it was the UNC votes that split going to the ILP. And it has always been this way. So again, who stands to benefit from this legislation? Obviously the UNC. They knew that. So the legislation is to benefit one political party out of all the others, parading under the guise of more democracy. That's the bait to fool people. So you have to recognize, my dear people, this is the plain brass facts about the matter. Only the UNC benefits from it. And in politics, when you interfere with the sacred laws of a country, its constitution, for one political ruling party to keep in power, that is called political blasphemy. Point number 4. Since it is only the two traditional parties, the PNM and the UNC or PP, that has large blocks of voters, the law will only allow these two parties to contest in a marginal seat where the PNM may win with the larger amount of votes, but not 50%. And the UNC or the PP, which came second, will be allowed to challenge the PNM. All third parties are eliminated from getting a second chance to decide the outcome of a general election. a general election serves for all the parties to get a chance to vote. And the result of the voting determines the outcome of that general election. Here in the marginal seats, only 2 parties will be allowed to decide the outcome of a general election while all third parties are eliminated. Put it this way, 2 parties alone get a second chance. Third parties do not get a second chance because the runoff doesn't involve third parties also. So they deny third parties their voting rights, and this is what we call 2-party hegemony in voting by law, because third parties are denied that freedom to vote by law. So while only the 2 major parties are given a second chance, the third parties are not. A law that gives some more voting powers or more voting chances than others is an unequal law and a discriminatory law. Therefore, the runoff voting is discriminatory.
The proposed changes made by one of the independent senators concerning the runoff, if properly investigated, brings us back to the very same situation before we had a runoff voting. In other words, the original results of a general election in a marginal seat, where you would have one person winning that seat, but not with 50%, and then you may have runner-ups, that same situation will take place again if the runoff voting follows the pattern given by that independent senator. So then what's the sense? Why have that? Why not just leave things as they were? You see, we do not need an amendment to the amendment. We need to end the amendment because every part of those provisions are wrong and can be demonstrated to be so. Let us deal again quickly with runoff here. If we have 800,000 people eligible to vote in a general election and 600,000 people vote, of that 600,000 people, we have the results of the initial will of the people in a general election. And a party wins because they win 3 of the marginal seats, although they did not get 50% and more. But what do we have here? If we allow 60,000 from those 3 marginal seats to go and vote again a second time, we are allowing 540,000 people to have one chance of voting, while only 60,000 people, a minority, has a second chance at voting and maybe a third. This is completely unfair. We know that when a person go and put their votes, they're supposed to only vote once. Yet this legislation makes some people, about let's say 60,000, in 3 marginal seats, this legislation makes those people get a second chance at voting to change the outcome of a whole general election. Should we have a minority, 60,000, have a second right to vote, while the 540,000 have only one right to vote? Isn't that crazy legislation? Isn't it wrong? The point is the provisions are completely wrong. You cannot amend them. You're supposed to get rid of them. And you see, this is what bullying is. Bullying is getting an unfair advantage. An unfair advantage. We would like to see the public get a chance to talk about this bill based on a referendum. But no, when people bully you with law, they always want an unfair advantage. And this is why we say this whole legislation in this bill is wrong.
Point number 5. The legislation, this runoff voting, obviously destroys the perceptions of third-party voters. How does it do that? It tells them that it makes no sense in voting for third parties since their votes are going to be eliminated and their influence through the votes are going to be eliminated from influencing the voting landscape. And since this is going to be eliminated, only two parties are going to have a face-off. Third parties are going to have to accept the law that their minority voting no longer have any influence, as it should have, in the outcome of the political landscape in a general election. This perception that will touch the minds of third-party voters is what we call psychological, political robbery, thus disenfranchisement in their minds. So they look at it as a kind of psychological, it affects them, political robbery. So they are disenfranchised because they recognize my vote is a waste of time. It wouldn't help at all, and it will be gotten rid of. Point number 6. Again, here is what is wrong with the runoff second ballot voting. This law targets marginal seats, which will create the situation the law is written to deal with. But for only the marginal seats, listen to me carefully, but for only the marginal seats to get a second chance to decide the complete and total outcome of a general elections by using their second chance, which is denied to others in the whole country by law, is unfair to the majority of voters in a country who does not have a second chance but have to settle for others who have more chances than them to change the whole outcome of a general elections by the second chance of those constituencies. The point is, if these constituencies have a second chance that the whole country doesn't have, and it will change the political landscape, their chance is more than the average person all over the country. So it robs the whole country of democracy by placing only a small few in controlling power to the outcome of the general election. And why do we say that? Because they alone are given a second chance, and the issue here is second chance, while the others are not given. Point number 7. A law that makes voting a second time legal for some and illegal for others, that a few people in the marginal seats might get a second chance to reverse the outcome of a general election and then determine the final outcome, is a loss of voting rights and voting influence of the majority of people in a country, and to also nullify, it is to also nullify the initial will of the people. Translate. The initial will of the people in a general elections makes a political party win, but it doesn't have a majority of the votings in certain marginal seats. He doesn't have 50%, but he has won the seat. The whole country watches and says, well, this party has won. But now with the run-out voting, they will stop all of this. They will tell a few in these marginal seats, you have the right to have a second vote. You have the right to change the outcome of the whole general elections. You have a double voting, second chance voting in this elections, while the whole country doesn't have. So they'll have to wait on you for you to change the outcome of the whole general elections. That's unfair, and that is going against the initial will of the people in a general election. Yes, my dear people, we need to look at the value of third parties in the outcome of a general elections. What are the values of third parties in the outcome of a general elections? I quote what I've written here. In the conclusions of a general elections in which the ruling party lost the elections through some of their votes going to a third party, those votes are not to be considered or cheapened as mere protest votes that can be discarded in a runoff system of second ballot. And you see, this is what they are saying. They are saying, oh, those are just protest votes. So, okay, you had a protest, let us now come and vote back for us. Join back the UNC, join back the PP, vote for us. The facts are, my dear people, those votes of third parties are to be considered punishment votes. Notice this, not protest votes, punishment votes, as their intention can be to help in the total votes to influence the outcome of a general elections. So a third party will punish the ruling party, and that will cause another party to come into power, and therefore that party in the elections, that large party is punished. So those votes are punishment votes, not protest votes. But a runoff would seek to destroy the punishment that the party has to go through to put them back in power. You see, point number 2, a monolithic political party, a huge political party that is ruling the country as the government and has access to state media as the government and to other resources to use to influence the outcome of a general elections in their favor, and especially if their voting base is a racial majority. This can only be stopped if their racial majority is split. If their racial voting majority is split, that's the only way you can get them out of power. This becomes necessary when disaffections arise because of the perceived corruptions of that political party in office. Such third-party votes saves the country from the ruling government. Yes, my dear people, they save the country from the ruling government by ensuring that they lose the elections and that they may demit office, so that the new administration may investigate their corruption, bring them to trial, and perhaps to justice. And that's the importance of a third party that must have influence in the voting landscape as a result of a general elections. Now, this could not be able to happen, this will not be able to happen if a runoff system that eliminates the influence of third-party votes in a general elections. And that's what the runoff system does. It eliminates the influence of a third-party votes in general elections. A runoff second ballot keeps that party in power by giving them the second chance to harness their split votes by some form of seduction. Thus, the corruptions in office will receive no address as the party continues in power. So a split vote is important to remove the party, the influence of a split vote, that people may now get a breather from them and get a chance to address the perceived corruption. That's the importance of third-party voting. But the runoff system destroys all of that. Again, a genuine and healthy democracy allows for third-party voters to have an influence in a general election to affect the outcome of a general elections. It allows for punishing votes against any party some people deem not fit for office, especially by splitting the votes they might traditionally receive to keep them in office. Runoff legislation denies the voters that initial will in the results of a general election. To use the law to deny the influence of punishment votes in a general elections is anti-democratic and robs the people of their voting rights by robbing them of the results of their sum total of choice and their initial will. So, my dear people, forget all the high-sounding philosophy of UNC analysts, of those political analysts that try to make UNC look good or make the People's Partnership look good with this law. This law is a plain, simple thing. It is merely to stop the PNM, who is the enemy. It is really to stop the ILP, that is the spoiler. It is really to stop the splitting of votes. It is really to encourage the UNC or the PP to get all their votes that they may stay in office. So what do you have here? You have a government, after so much corruption allegations, have the, what we should say, the outrageous attitude to bring a bill to now change the Constitution. They forget Section 34 so recently. They forget Email Gate. They forget Live Sport Gate. They forget state of emergency gate and all the gates that they have carried us through. They forget all of that. And now you come to change the constitution and create another gate, a gate to make yourself go back in power. That's what you have done. It's so outrageous. We cannot express how outraged we should be. You see, in politics, when the sacred laws of a country is tampered with by a government to keep themselves in power, in politics, we call that blasphemy. That is political blasphemy. Thank you very much. Nothing here was said in hate for the UNC or the PNM or any government. All the governments that have ever passed here, all the parties have done good for the country. The PNM has done good for the country. They have done a lot of things. The PP has done good for the country. They have done a lot of things. The social work, where they're channeling funds to help people, is very good. And we hope if another party comes in power, they will continue that. Because all the parties have done something. None is the enemy. The law there, that law is the enemy. And please let us get rid of this enemy for Christ's sake. Amen.